Hi, everybody. This is Todd Hayen here and William MP. This is ManTalk. And welcome to all of you to hear another talk about a little clip I'm going to play in a minute. That's actually very funny. So we'll get going on that in a minute. Anybody want to get a hold of me, go to my website, which is right down there below. If you want to email me, this is my email address. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Write to us and ask or suggest some clips or some ideas. I mean, it doesn't need to be a clip, but if you want us to talk about something in particular, just send us an email and let us know. And that's it for me. And this is William's email, so let him tell you about it.
Yep, that's me. Likewise. Questions, comments, concerns, critiques?
You want to tell everybody how famous you are?
Not famous enough. I think the last episode got, 10 views?
Huh?
I think the last episode got about 10 views, and I think 5 of them were...
No, I actually had more than that. I had
really?
26, I think.
Moving on up.
Yeah, right. Come on, people. Yeah, get out there. Yeah. Anyway, that's another topic. So let me play this this little funny thing, and we'll go from there. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, here it is.
A man has ruined a weekend away with his girlfriend by saying what he was thinking. Our reporter Emma Bradford is at the scene.
Martin Bishop and Eleanor Shaw had stopped at a cosy country pub after a romantic walk when Miss Shaw looked up meaningfully at Bishop and asked what he was thinking at that very moment. The weekend was about to go very wrong indeed.
I was hoping he would say, maybe this would be a great place to bring the kids one day. Or even something corny but sweet, like, I have everything I'll ever need right here.
And what did you say, Martin?
I said, pigs are much bigger than you expect. One of them was so big you could ride it.
More from...
She's like mortified in the background.
I know, and I like it how he doesn't give up on the, isn't that amazing? You could ride that pig. It's like, huh?
That is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
A pig big enough to ride.
Okay. So what do you think this is telling us? What makes this funny?
Because everyone knows this. I mean, I think it's like a running joke. And I think that's why that old book, which I don't know anything about, Men Are From...
right. Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, yeah.
Right. I mean, everyone knows the title because it kind of speaks to this, like, the alienation of the sexes from each other. Mm-hmm. And this kind of, partly funny, but also sort of tragic way in which we struggle to relate to each other. And we kind of have this blockage where we, the men are dumbfounded by women's behaviors and how they think and feel, and likewise on the other side. And, it's sort of funny until it's not. And then, there's this kind of question I think that floats in the ether about that people always think of as like a perennial question that will never get answered, which is like, why is it that the sexes can't understand each other, or I don't know, like you like feel what each other are feeling, relate to each other. Maybe that's what I'm looking for. I mean, we laugh it off. It's like, I guess we'll never know. But I don't think that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing that just popped in my mind that I think is interesting is too how if you're going to make a joke about it, the joke is always on the guy. You don't have a situation where we are dumbfounded or we find it comical that the woman doesn't get it. Why is it that the male is the one that has to accommodate? He's the one that has to come to her page. Like in this situation, if he had thought to say, I see here that this is everything I would ever want, that he would be deviating from what his, the whole joke is he said what he was thinking. Mm-hmm. So that was what he was thinking. And why is he the one that's inappropriate? And she wasn't, for saying, oh yeah, the pigs are really big, you could ride one.
For the same reason that you can make jokes about white people And no one even thinks for a second that that would be racist. It's this concept of punching down, that it's okay to make fun of punching up. It's okay to make fun of those who are in power, because you can't hurt them really because they have the power. But it's bad to punch down because now you're attacking people who
you're
are
kicking someone
disadvantaged, so it's not
right.
fair.
Right.
And that's kind of this tacit thing that we've all agreed to, where go ahead and make fun of white people because they have all the privilege and all the power, and therefore it's okay. They can't be offended. I mean, they aren't anyway.
Yeah, and you see this too, like, but the interesting thing with what I'm going to say right now is that, like, television series over time, like sitcoms, you go back to the early 60s and you see something like The Lucy Show, and she's made fun of, she's silly, she's funny, where Ricardo was more down to earth and whatever, but he was made fun of too. So it's like it's both. And you look at Leave It to Beaver, and there was comedy in June's,
sure,
whatever. But then you move forward and you go into things like The Simpsons or Family Guy, and the woman, the mother, is the one that's got it all together.
That's right.
The father's the idiot. And we see that in live action stuff too, with kids, even like the smart kid is the girl, the dumb kid, the idiot kid is the boy. And that's more of a current kind of thing that we've moved into. It didn't used to be like that even 60 years ago. It wasn't so much like that.
Well, it was subversive, and it was originally to kind of turn the narrative around, and to say, and people loved it, that okay, finally we can see a strong female character.
Right.
And there was, I think, a thirst for that in the population. And I don't think that it was only in women that were thirsty to see that. I think men seeing women in empowered positions, for them that was new and it was novel and it was great. I mean, I think a lot of the under the sort of peak of the worst kind of 2 generations ago, like the sort of the misogyny under the kind of patriarchal frame in that way. I think a lot of men, because there was this thing within homosocial circles where it was just kind of like, well, that's what we do and think. But I think a lot of men didn't actually believe it. They loved their wives, they respected their mothers, and they would kind of like get wrapped up in these conversations. But then post women's lib, I think there was a lot of kind of like, oh, thank God we don't have to like do that nonsense anymore, because I don't think men harbored truly misogynistic feelings towards women. But it would be because it was unchecked back in the 1950s. I think a lot of men who did had a lot of cover for that and kind of got away with it. But so now that things are shifting in this way, I think there's that sense of like, okay, we can start to present women as being empowered and men as being disempowered, and it's okay. But this is like a pendulation, right? I mean, one of the problems that we see in all this, which is almost like, can you say it's a problem? I think it's just a natural thing, that when you have, when the power is swung one way, it wants to swing back the other way. When what really would be good for society is for the two to integrate and find a balancing of that pendulation. Robert Moore talks about this in The Integration of the Psyche, that you're swinging between, coward and tyrant. But what you're trying to find is that center. You're trying to stop that pendulation. So I think this is part of it. And I think we're, right now, the reason that these jokes kind of seem a little outdated is I think we're not in that place that we were back in whenever this was. I mean, it looks to me something like 2010s or something. I don't know when it was, but I think those kind of jokes were different. I don't think it would play.
Which joke? Which joke?
You saw, the clip that you played. I think that.
Okay.
I think it's not funny anymore.
It might not be. It is to an old guy like me. I think it's funny. But yeah, that's true. But I also relate it to my clients. I see this very often in clients, and the thing that I see in clients is not so much what we've been talking about, but more this inability to understand and to play a romantic moment. That there's a dissociation from it, and I think that's a relatively recent thing. And I could be totally wrong, because I don't know what it was like back in the 1700s or whatever, because I wasn't there. But if you certainly look at recent history, like going back to the 30s or 40s, we see films and things that depict what romance was like maybe at that time, at least some kind of rendition of it. And there was a greater understanding and a greater of familiarness with what being romantic was about from a male perspective, not just from a female perspective. But there was still, I mean, again, whether this is an archetypal thing or what, there was still, even at that time, there was a misunderstanding a lot of times that men had almost be kicked in the head for them to recognize they were in a romantic situation. I just watched, just for the hell of it, I watched Meet Me in St. Louis, the Judy Garland, Vincent Minnelli film from, I can't remember when it was made, but it took place in the early 1900s. And the lead character, who's Esther, who's played by Judy Garland, has a crush on the boy next door. And she's only 17 or whatever. And there's also an older relationship that's going on. And it was very much like this clip. You know, the guy just didn't get it. He just didn't know he was supposed to be romantic. And, you know, the girl invites him to come in and help her turn the gas lights off and whatever. And he just doesn't get it. So this is obvious that this has been going on a long time, but there still is a greater awareness at one time or another to what romance and romancing your partner was about. And I, you know, from my clients that I see, it's largely missing from these couples, and it's one of the things we work on. You know.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that it comes down to, like, what Jung would say is it's a lack of integrating the contrasexual? It's that women struggle to integrate the masculine, men struggle to integrate the feminine.
Well, I think, yeah. And I think this is where the problem is that men don't naturally understand certain nuances about the feminine, and vice versa. Women do not. Like a woman doesn't understand, and I'm making a broad stroke. Obviously, there's outliers to everything, but a woman doesn't understand when a man says, "Isn't it amazing how big pigs are? They're bigger than we expect them to be." That she doesn't play with that, just like he doesn't play with whatever it is that she's. And, you know, in modern couples therapy, I think this is probably the biggest problem, is that neither, you know, in a heterosexual relation, I think this would be the same with any kind of relationship, that people are different. They don't understand the subjective reality of the other person. And if we're talking about masculine, feminine, integrating the feminine, integrating the masculine, we're going to find it from masculine, feminine, that's where that complete disconnect, and there's no willingness to get it. There's no willingness to say, this is something that I don't understand, but I'm going to make an attempt to understand it.
Yeah, I mean, but I think now you're talking about something that's related but slightly different, because you're talking about just the rise in trait narcissism, right? And because we live in a society that's structured toward narcissistic tendencies, and I think, and so being stuck in your own narcissism blocks you from integrating your empathy, right? Because narcissism will kind of like stifle empathy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But I think that's different, though, than what you were talking about. And the reason I made that face before was, you said, like, I think men naturally. I don't think it's that it's naturally. I actually think it's just men
naturally. What did I say? Naturally what?
Well, struggle to understand romance, I think is what you said. And I don't think it's natural. I think it's not. For example, it's not. It's environmental, right? I don't think you're born. I mean, I think you're born with the capacity to be able to integrate both masculine and feminine energies within you, and it's what's drawn out of you. It's what they call like epigenetics. It's like, were you born in an environment that's going to be conducive to you?
So you're saying men have to be taught to be like the guy in the clip?
Not taught, because you already know it. It's kind of Neoplatonic in that it's like drawing out of you something that's already inherent in you. right? I think rather than taught, I think I prefer to say that it needs to be modeled. And I think that there needs to be conditions under which it's okay for you to integrate the feminine.
Okay, now which thing are we talking about that needs to be modeled? Are we talking about the comment, the pragmatic thought comment about pigs are big, or are we talking about the romantic, for him to make a romantic statement like she was expecting or wanting?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the part that is innate but needs to be essentially nurtured out?
Exactly.
Which one is it that
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about? Just so I'm clear on that.
I would say that men naturally have the capacity to constellate sentimentality, romance, and
Okay.
all,
Yes.
all those things naturally. And you don't need to learn it. It's not something that someone needs to like sit you down and explain.
No, but this is, and this is all about some semantics and whatever. But my belief is that that's what the archetypes do. The archetypes are a natural, innate capacity. They don't necessarily just immediately come forth, but they have to be constellated, and often they do have to be nurtured. They have to be something that's aware, and especially if they're not integrated.
Yeah, the conditions have to be
said,
right for them to be able to naturally come forward. Because usually what's happening here is something is blocking them. But I don't know, why does it feel like semantics to you? Because what's the semantic?
Well, because I'm using the word natural, and then you said you didn't really agree with that, and then you used the word natural the same way I did. So I mean, it's just the
Right. I mean, because I think natural. I mean, I was taking what you meant naturally as being like archetypal. And now we're on the same page because archetypal. Yeah.
Right. That's what I mean. When I say natural, I mean archetypal. I mean it's accessible. It's there, but it's not. And we may really. I mean, there may be some things that one of the things that I believe is that men, as opposed to women, a lot men have to be taught, and it isn't so much that they have to be taught from a blank slate, but they have to be taught how to use the masculine archetypes, how to constellate them, how to bring them forward more, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, more than women do. I don't think women, I think women are much more organic. They have access to the natural earth powers more so than men do. I mean, the image of Icarus flying to the sun or reaching out for spirituality or whatever is typically a masculine thing. Okay, now that's kind of beside the point of what we're talking about, but I think that's one reason why we get in situations where the man, without having any kind of and I guess you would probably call this feminine integration, without really having a strong feminine integration, is going to be in an environmentally romantic moment, something that anyone else, or certainly any woman, would look at and say, this is romantic. Here you are sitting out by the lake, the moon is shining, it's like, here we are together. And he goes, look at how big those pigs are. Okay, that is something that, yes, if he hasn't been nurtured properly to understand, that isn't appropriate or isn't going to really get anywhere in that environment.
Yeah, totally. But I actually think you're right, though. I think it is a semantic issue because, thinking back about, why is it that what are we getting tripped up on? Well, if there was something natural about about men that make it difficult, I mean, clearly we can look at this from the perspective of having testosterone versus having estrogen and progesterone. I mean, I think testosterone, because you notice this is very interesting. So assigned female at birth, people, they take testosterone. It's very interesting to hear how they talk about their subjective experience. A lot of trans men will be surprised. Oh, like now that I'm taking testosterone, like, holy shit, I get it. Why it's like I'm quick to anger, and I'm like I'm not as romantic or whatever. And I think there's a neurochemical aspect of this that maybe is what we're talking about when we talk about natural. Because I think if you're higher in testosterone, it's definitely going to be more challenging for you to be empathetic. Now, I'm not a nurse.
Okay, let me throw this into what you're saying there. I agree with you. I think the physiological part,
right,
the hormonal part, the testosterone, is what makes a man, okay, a man that has testosterone running, the right genetics, whatever, to constellate what we call the masculine archetypes more readily, more quickly than the opposite. So that's where the physiology comes in my view. So if you are taking testosterone, you're more likely then to constellate the warrior, the male the masculine archetypes. You're more likely to do that. They're closer to the surface because of your physiology. But that's it. That's the only reason. You can constellate any archetype, feminine, masculine, whatever, if you choose to. If you can find a way to do it, but it's not natural. Okay, if we're using
you're right, and I'm interested in what you said about, like, it's a good question to ask. Is it more difficult for bodies that are testosterone dominant to integrate traits, archetypally feminine traits, than it is for estrogenated bodies to integrate
I would say yes, but I don't know. I mean,
from
there might be
clinical experience,
research.
I think you can say, I mean, that strikes me as empirically obvious. But I mean, it's an interesting question. I like the question, and I think you're probably onto something, that there is a possibility that one is more difficult than the other.
I don't know if again, semantic wise, I don't know if I'd use the word difficult, although that probably works. Maybe it has to do with accessibility. And it would be more difficult. But then you get into things like homosexuality, where there is no physiological, at least from what I understand about it, physiological difference. And there might be a homosexual man, say, that would have certain masculine archetypes that are more accessible for constellation than a man who is homosexual. The same thing, but has more feminine. And that would not be predicated on the hormonal. Maybe not. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that works that way. Are there gay men that have higher testosterone levels? And does that create a certain type of gay personality?
I don't know. I mean, I don't. There's probably been research on it. As far as I know, though, I've never heard any research that would suggest that same-sex orientations have anything to do with levels of hormones. But I mean, I suppose obviously that there could be some effect there. Yeah, it's a very interesting.
Well, nobody ever these days ever uses this archetypal theory in discussing things like homosexuality or whatever, or trans even. I mean, they don't use, my view is that a trans person that identifies as a different sex than what they were physically born with is actually dealing with a archetypal dysfunction or glitch or whatever. You don't have to put a pathology to it, but that's more of an archetypal situation. Of course, you never hear that. I've never read anything that comments on any kind of archetypal involvement with trans identification. It would be very interesting.
Well, no, I think one of the frames that you can look at that under archetypally is that it's a function of trickster energy.
Definitely.
And, if you look at the history of shamanic practice, like Mircea Eliade and these guys, I mean, what they'll notice is that like a lot of people who are constellating some shamanic function within the culture are shapeshifters.
Yeah, I was just going to say shapeshifting. Yeah,
and shamanic regalia is often striking in that it's playing with these concepts of gender, and I think one of the facets of the shamanic is this capacity to move between two worlds, and so I think to a certain extent, when you are cultivating the shamanic archetype within you, you are trans in that moment, right? Because you're transcending between these two things. And it's also about, and it's not really about gender non-conformity, it's about gender transcendence. It's about what happens when these things ultimately merge at the peak. Because if you think of the way that Robert Moore is talking about the integration of the magician in the masculine psyche, the pinnacle of the magician is the shaman. That's the master magician, the one who can so effortlessly manipulate immaterial realms that they have taken it to a level that transcends the laws of chemistry and physics. right?
Yeah. No, that's very good. That's very good.
And
So
there are people out there. I mean, I've worked with some really, really great psychotherapists who are working with the trans population archetypally and introducing them to the concept of how.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
Okay, that's interesting.
The question is this experience that you're having that you're calling trans, that we don't want to pathologize, could it be that this is a kind of emerging a constellation of the shamanic that's being open for you? Is this a call to merge into that?
And well, I think in its truly authentic form, okay, not as a product of social contagion or whatever. In its truly authentic form, it would almost have to be that. Anytime somebody, I mean, what we've labeled medically as psychosis is a movement away from what we call reality. And I think that almost any shaman that does go beyond the veil and coming back and whatever would be considered psychotic in medical terms. So they are transcending the physical reality. And so is a trans person. I mean, they're transcending the physical reality of their genetics, of what they were born with. And of course, the culture is looking at it completely differently. They're looking at it as they're psychotic, or as these people are somehow screwed up in their head, that they're thinking they're something they're not, and whatever. And I think a lot of them would fall into that class. And you know, the ones too that want to change their physical body in order to match whatever their identification is also going down a road that is not a shamanic road. That is not a road of I mean, it's trying to manipulate the physical reality in order to match the psychic reality that they're experiencing, which really is counterproductive in my view.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is an interesting topic too, probably for another podcast. But I'm going to fuck this guy's name up, and I feel so badly because he's such a genius. Melodona Some. He's an African writer writing about shamanism, and he writes a lot about the kind of the colonial view of psychosis as pathologized. Within traditional indigenous cultures in Africa, particularly where he's from, that it's always seen as a kind of like a gift to the culture. Because this is the kind of an opening that the elders help you to steward in order for you to play a shamanic role within the culture. Yeah. But I think it's also, and I don't know if this is his point, but it would definitely be mine, but we have to be able to discern between, is this a shamanic opening or is this a disintegration of ego, right? Because it's not that like anytime you have a kind of break from reality where your sense of truth starts to crumble, that it's not always a shamanic opening, right? Just like every time someone identifies as trans, it doesn't always mean that it's coming from a place of the shamanic.
No, and I didn't mean to imply that.
No, I don't think you did.
There's too much psychological junk that we all deal with that we have to factor in and understand that. It's not.
I agree.
Yeah.
We're in dangerous territory here, Todd, because there are people that
I know.
say that anybody who identifies as being trans is to be believed and to be affirmed and to be accepted, and that there should never be a question of whether or not the subjective experience of believing that you were born into the wrong body is coming from someplace anything other than what we understand.
Well, that's also because the culture is essentially dictating that we have a federal law here in Canada that, you basically cannot affirm a biological sexual, reality if somebody is coming to you as a therapy client claiming that they have. And I'm not going to comment on that. Just as you're saying, we're going into some dangerous territory with it. But I think that there is, as far as the culture is concerned, the culture has very, very, very little, if any, tolerance for anything that's metaphysical in any way at all. So it's all objective. Objective reality is the only reality there is, and by objective I mean material reality. Cause and effect, whatever it might be. And if you insist on that, you're never going to be able to factor in
Mm-hmm.
the kinds of things we're talking about with these conditions, with these situations. And these people will be eternally lost as long as they're in that culture that insists that it is a material presentation. You know, it's like you can't be a different sex because you were born with this one. That's a very material presentation and concept. And therefore the only option they have is to go that route, you know. And if the law allows it to go have surgery or to go take drugs or whatever it might be, that's the only route they have. And it didn't used to be that way, for one thing. There were a lot of trans people that identified as the opposite sex back throughout history, and they were not accepted in the culture, yes, but they also found a way to express themselves within that context without having to go an objective route of removing body parts and whatever it might be. I'm going way too far with this, so pull us back some. Yeah, I know we could
I'll
go
pull
on
you back
forever.
a little bit.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I like this. This is good. This is a good topic. Now, I mean, my point I was just going to add to you is that yes, it is a kind of a function of the scientific purview. Right? When you get lost in the Cartesian nightmare, I mean, of course, it's like really, you can't integrate anything metaphysical, anything transpersonal. It's just, it's false by definition.
And that's in everything in psychology. That's not just the trans issue. That's in depression. It's in anxiety. It's in everything. Yeah.
Right. It's got to come from some neurochemical imbalance. The theory, which of course has been developed for ages. But no, and I think that the other problematic thing that you're talking about is that it's also a major feature of Marxism. Right? Is this insistence upon a materialistic view of the world?
Oh yeah, of course.
And so when you get into not only a scientifically driven culture, but one that still keeps the kind of flames of Marxist ideology alive, those people are going to specifically be the ones who think of anything, as you say, metaphysical or transpersonal, as like it sort of baffling that we would still be seduced by such bullshit, I guess, is the attitude, which I find incredibly limiting to the development and progress. Ironically, because they're usually progressives, because I think an integration of an understanding that spiritual experience, transpersonal experiences have been with us for all of time and aren't going anywhere. And to try to ignore them and pathologize them and turn them into the only ones who believe in this stuff must be pathologically stupid or duped.
That's an enemy of the state,
an enemy
as well,
right. Exactly,
which is a big
punishable.
deal.
Punishable with the full force
of
the monopoly of violence from the
state
actors.
Right. And the state obviously has the ultimate power.
Yeah.
Mao had a lot to say about this idea of what was it? The people versus the people against the people, which is essentially what we're talking about here. And that's the state sanction of metaphysics. Whatever you want to fit into that as being the enemy of the people. That's what we're experiencing now in the world. This, and we definitely don't want to go there. But no, that's really good point. The Marxism that you're putting in there with it. I think most people don't ever think of Marxism as having anything to do with what you're talking about with metaphysics and whatever. And I think it's an important concept. But let's go back to the pigs.
Men are from women. Men are from Venus. Women are from Mars. Is that what it is?
No, it's the other way around. Women are Venus. Men are Mars.
Oh,
what was the name of that psychologist? He was very famous for a while. I can't remember his name. I mean, it's a good point, because it does bring things back to a level of understanding. I mean, most people are not interested in the depths of all of this and in explanation or whatever. So it's very easy to point those differences out. Again, I think it's certainly from my clinical experience. I think and this is something you touched on a minute ago about our current time in the culture. We're very intolerant. And I think that intolerance comes from what you said, what you were saying about the narcissism, that the lack of empathy. Empathy is tolerance. Empathy is being able to look at somebody else's experience and to be able to identify to some degree with it. to be able to look at it and say, gee, I'm not that person. I'm not experiencing that. But I can see why they're upset or why they're angry or why they're sad or whatever it might be, because I'm stretching, I'm tolerating something. I'm tolerating a foreign subjective reality.
Exactly. And this is the thing
Yeah.
that's driven me crazy for years, that when we actually place the sort of, we think of the target, the place we want to be is tolerance. Ew,
Yeah.
tolerance. Yuck. What do you,
Yeah.
okay,
Right.
fine.
Right.
You know, I'm repulsed by you, but all right, I'm going to, because it's the right thing to do, I'll allow it to happen. Because I think what's the problem is, it's not really that we're lacking tolerance within our society. It's empathy and respect.
Well, that's what it,
right?
that's, yeah. If again, we're using words that aren't fully adequate. Tolerance implies what you just said, implies this is really painful. Like if somebody's sticking you in the arm with a knife, I can tolerate that pain. And what I'm describing,
pain,
right? What I'm describing, though, you're right, is not cannot really be limited to that. It's not I tolerate you, I can't stand you, I hate you, you're painful, but I'll tolerate you. No, it's an easy word to use because it covers a lot of things, but it's I can't have empathy for you because I cannot. I am right. Everything that I see is the way it is. There is no tolerance, quote unquote, for anything outside of this narrow path. Therefore, you're an asshole. I hate you.
Right.
You know, whatever it might be, because you're not right here. Now, who defines that? That's the trick. That's where we get into politics. We get into the state. You know, the state defined in Soviet Russia, the state defined what Marxism is. This is what it is. And this is the narrow band you have to function in. So yeah, we're losing that. We're losing that ability or that desire, that intention.
The lack
to
of
be
empathy is
empathic.
shocking. It really is shocking.
Yeah.
And the lack of just fundamental respect, civility. You know,
Well,
if you think of the like, and the amount of like suffering that comes out of that. You know, like it, and I think if someone was to ask me, like, you know, what is your unconditional commitment? You know, why is it that you do the work that you do? I mean, ultimately for me, it's about being committed to doing whatever I possibly can to help people collectively liberate themselves from suffering. So the question is always like, how can we come at this where we can help people to let go of attitudes and perceptions that are hurting them and hurting other people, right? And I think this concept of tolerance, where it's like, you know, this is an interesting one that I've seen recently, where I started to realize about a year ago that right wing was an insult, that it was a slur, that it was like you would paint somebody with that brush, and I'm going,
right.
What? What do you mean? And this is a tolerance point, because the left feels like, listen, we've been tolerating you, but if you get too much, if there's too much of your right wing stuff, then no, we can't tolerate you anymore. And now we see you as just a problem that we've been putting up with.
Right.
Not a position that we can say, I don't agree with you, but I can empathize with where you're coming from, and I can respect your position enough to not demonize you for having it. And like my point is this, that it creates suffering. When you think of lefties are all idiots and they're all dupes and they believe in bullshit and fuck them, and you delight in seeing them, you know, roasted online, you know, you're in a state of suffering. Schadenfreude is, I mean, it only on the very surface has the kind of illusion of pleasure, but really it comes from a deep feeling of discomfort and fear and pain. Neither of those positions are liberating to the human soul. That they're constricting. And I think the reason is that we think, well, we've been made to believe that tolerance is enough. No, tolerance is not.
No, it's not, because the context you're putting it in, it definitely is not. Yeah. It's not. It's empathy. It's being able to look at something that that you find on first glance hateful or whatever it might be, and being able to see the side of that another human being can see. And being able to you don't have to agree with it, obviously, but being able to feel it within yourself, not tolerate it,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I use that word just because it's an easy word to use, but as we get into the detail of it, now bringing this back, I think it's just to bring it back to the pig, the pig moment, that what I see again with my couples is this inability to look at her, like take it from his side, looking at her, wanting to hear the romantic thing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite things about that clip is watching the actor when she's saying, I just thought that he might say this would be a nice time to bring the kids back, and she's crying. He's not empathizing with her at all. If you watch him, he's more concerned about, well, what did I say that was so stupid? What I'm on the spot here, because obviously everybody watching this and the reporter and whatever think what I said was weird and was strange, but he's not hearing her either. So in that moment, he is not empathizing
Mm-hmm.
with her reality.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't with his, because she's crying that he would say the stupid thing he said. Now I know it's a comedy skit, but I see this with my clients a lot, that they don't get it. They don't get it.
Yeah.
And neither one of them do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's more like we said at the very start, because of this pendulum swing we're going through, where toxic masculinity and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, men can't feel and all this kind of stuff, that we're swinging in that direction. It's more common with my couples that the woman thinks she's right, that he's the one that has a problem because he can't interface with her.
Yeah.
But it's the other way around as well.
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't it funny to her in the clip? Of course, it wouldn't be a funny clip then, but why isn't it funny to her that he would say, pigs are bigger than you think they are?
Yeah.
You know, why didn't she laugh at that and go along with it? Oh yeah, they are. Look at that one. You could ride that one.
Yeah, well, secure, fulfilled women wouldn't be. They'd laugh. They'd be like, "Oh my god!" It's funny to them. I think the reason that like this character in this sketch is so mortified is because she actually does feel a kind of an insecurity. Like, "Oh my god, you don't understand that what I need from you is sentimentality,"
absolutely.
and that's actually really
it's a threat to her.
Stabilizing me. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. And vice versa to some degree. Yeah. I mean, he's probably more confused than she's upset.
Yeah.
He's probably more confused as to what did I do?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I would never say what she wants me to say. And I would say, because he's like completely disconnected from it. He doesn't even see what he said as being weird to her. Okay.
This is interesting. This is reminding me of actually something that you taught me. So I remember when I was an intern, creating all these kind of like anchors to bring me back into the frame of therapy, right? And one of them that I came up with was what to do, work on you. And this actually came from something that you were teaching us at the Living Institute, which was the concept of, you know, the conscious to unconscious, and then the transference field unconscious.
Oh, right.
I think you were training us to like be consciously aware of what's coming up from your own unconscious to be mindfully aware of that, because that's the one thing that you can be be in choice to be focused on, right?
Right.
What's coming up for me in this moment would be the thing.
Right.
But what to do, work on you, actually becomes for me a kind of a guideline for how to work with people who are in relational trouble, right?
Mm-hmm.
The question isn't what's wrong, what's fucked up about your partner, although we often do. We'll spend 30 minutes talking about that and sort of theorizing about what the fuck's wrong with you, which I think you have to get through, right?
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, what I always try to bring people back to is, what is this person bringing up in you that's not integrated? So, you know, this guy is my client. I'm saying, right. So what she's mirroring for you, what she's showing you is what's in your blind spot is the capacity to recognize that this is a sentimental moment.
Yeah.
The question is what's happening between the battle of the sexes and the collective from a therapeutic perspective. It's what gets in the way of you integrating sentimentality, romantic thoughts, right? And I think that's an interesting thing to look at. And one of the things that I often come back to is that I think when young men, uninitiated or unguided through initiation processes as they are, they'll often conflate the immature masculine with the feminine, and they'll say, okay, so if I want to integrate into adult masculinity, I can. What I'm being asked to do is to let go of the immature little boy. I need to die to him in order to become a man.
Right.
But what they get confused of, because they're not guided, is so all of the qualities that I used to have, wonderment and connection to like a kind of whatever, and it gets swept away. And part of that is sentimentality. I was sentimental when I was a younger man, but now that sentimentality is going to be perceived as immature. So I have to put that to one side and act as though I'm not sentimental. But I think that then turns into a kind of unconscious misogyny, like I was saying before, though, but doesn't actually come from a lack of respect from the feminine. It comes from a fear of the feminine, because you associate it with you did associate it with that. So if you look at it from that perspective, it's like, what is it about you being tuned into sentiment and the romantic and this moment? What was it that's getting blocked in you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a really, really good way to put all of that. And it's either they're in their complex, in their system, they are fearful of the feminine because they associate it with a negative masculinity, or they don't even know what immature masculinity, or they don't even see it. They've armored up so much, they put up so much barrier from that thing to avoid that immature masculinity, that they don't even see it. And this is where we go back, just full circle, we go back to the idea of lack of empathy, or the loss of the ability to empathize, which is due to an armoring. And you can go back into almost anybody's childhood, and you can certainly see where those walls were put up and why. And I agree with you 100% that there is, I mean, that conflation with the little boy and the feminine, because they're very closely related in their behavior. Is a huge danger. Yeah.
And I think so. A lot of it comes down to this abandonment of the elders that we now are facing, because essentially what was lacking for a young man in that moment, that I'm sort of theorizing, is that he didn't have mature elder women and men and people in between to model that and say, oh no, in some way to say, oh no, don't let it's sentimentality isn't the problem.
Right.
And to be able to do that. And of course, this is what we were saying before. I don't think it's about teaching. I think it's about modeling. I think that young man craves elders that he can look to and who are showing him, without telling him, showing him what it's like or how it can be to be in your masculine, but also to be open and sentimental. And I don't know if that's the right word. I mean, I keep saying sentimental. I'm sort of halfway not.
No, well, again, we're dealing with words, and they're not complex enough.
But anyway, it's a failure of eldership ultimately to be able to steward in this particular case young men through that initiatory period in which they would make that conflation problematically so, to give them to be able to integrate the feminine.
Yeah, being an artist, and I think we got in a little roundabout off the air about this idea. But I think that modeling doesn't just come from physical elders, like physical fathers and mothers. I think it comes from the culture as well.
Yeah.
And within the culture, art within the culture.
Defining this,
Yeah, right. I think this particular one we're talking about with romance or sentimentality or whatever, I think that is largely missing from the current culture in the media and in other access. I was talking about poetry or novels or art music that isn't like heavy metal music or whatever it might be, that or rap or whatnot. I mean, those particular kinds of music are probably counterproductive, counter modeling to what we're talking about, to sentimental romance connection with that. Because again, it's not something I think that's on the surface of the masculine pantheon of archetypes. It's not one that's close to the top. I think it does have to be modeled, it does have to be nurtured, it does have to be pulled out. And it's pulled out either through observation, through empirical experience with good parents that love one another, and that the father shows that kind of romantic inclination toward the mother. It's shown in films and in books and whatever, but I don't think we have as much of that as we used.
The nuclear family being the problem too, because your biological parents are never going to be able to do it enough. We need what they call allo parents. You need to be connected to a community where it's like whatever your mother and father are not modeling for you, you have enough deep connection to men and women in the culture or in the community who are able to model that for you. You know. And
well, so do we have that?
No.
Yeah, that's not present. And would you say it used to be more than it is now?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I'm thinking of an interesting experience of like going to Cuba and walking around Havana and seeing that like, everyone lived in like really like not very nice places. But what they did was they didn't care because they were out on the street. And what they would do is that they wouldn't go home like we do. We have a beautiful house and we go home and we luxuriate and we watch our television. No, they're like, my house isn't particularly nice. Doesn't matter though, because I'm outside. I go out in the evenings and I connect with people and I talk. And I remember marveling at like, oh my God, people just come out of their house and stand around on the street and converse with each other.
Yeah.
Interesting that was backed up when I heard there was a documentary about a Cuban who got refugee status in the United States and is living in some fucking place in Ohio and it's freezing out and he's locked in this little house by himself and he's like, get me the fuck out of here. What are we doing?
Yeah. No,
right?
No. No, and you experience that in primarily in third world countries, like you're describing. I experience almost the exact same thing you're describing when the first time I went to Cuba. And as Canadians, we can go to Cuba; Americans can't. But I mean, not so. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I agree 100% with the community thing going outside, but also just this whole idea of the purpose of being a human being was communing with one another, was touching each other and laughing with one another and walking down the street with one another. They don't have a lot of material stuff in places like that. Yeah. You experience this as in Egypt quite a bit as well when you go into the villages in Egypt. The kids are all together, they all have their arms around each other, they're little groups of people everywhere. And you don't see that anymore. And
this idea of it takes a village to raise a child is interestingly, one that's I think held by both the right and the left. But on the left, I grew up with this. There was always this importance placed on being exposed to other people's culture and different people so that it wasn't alien to you, so that you could learn from this community of people. Oh, look, this is what it's like to be in the presence of gay men or a trans person.
Right.
And it was like, we need to normalize these things. Don't silo yourself away and ignore this because you're not going to be able to, to be tolerant, and open and accepting. There's always this belief that it all came from ignorance. If only we could be with each other. And I think that's where there's this big breakdown now where, you get people on the right, the conservatives, who are mortified by the concept of drag queens reading to young children, because for them, it's like, oh my God, you're trying to expose them to an ideology that's completely antithetical to my potentially Christian values. Right. But where it comes from is, no, like for me, it's like, I'm not afraid that my kid would see a drag queen. In fact, I want her to be able to see what it's like to be like that. This is what it is. Here's modeling for you. And where the community can come together and say, it's okay for this man to dress this way. It's okay for this man to be that way, right? To present himself as a woman. And so that gives permission for the child to say, oh, right. And so if that's something for me, I can feel safe to be in that, right? But then you get on the left, or on the right, this kind of insistence that, no, hide them away from that. Don't show them that, which is a place of insecurity, because it's like, well, if you are so certain that your Christian values are important, why can't they stand the test of saying, like, if your young child sees that they would say, no, that's not for me, because I'm so I'm so well indoctrinated into Christian theology that I can see that that's not right. Am I making sense? Or
yeah, you're making sense. I'm not going to make a comment about it though. You know, it's I know, I think that's a beautiful way to look at it.
Yeah.
I do. I think there's with what's actually going on, you know, my personal feeling about it is that there's more to it than that.
Sure.
It's not as simple as a community. Oh, let's see, you know, show and tell. Let's see what you know, Margaret over here has to say, and she used to be a man, or she was born a man, and now she's coming to show you who she is. And that I mean, I think that's true probably in a lot of situations, but I don't think that's really where the controversy is. I think the whole controversy is built in order to polarize people.
No, 100%. And I think you're right. And
The
the piece I'm missing there is what people on the left don't understand is, you know, look, even though you're comfortable with it, doesn't mean that someone on the other side of the fence has to be comfortable with it, and you can't make them. It's to really be respectful and empathetic. It's to say, oh, I get it. Okay, what for me feels right and good feels very threatening to you, and I can respect that. I don't need to push that down your throat. And I think that's the major thing.
There's the empathy again coming into 100%. It. Yeah.
So as much as I would say I have no problem with my daughter being exposed to, you know, a drag queen. I mean, whatever. I think it's fantastic in the right context. I totally understand why somebody who is very religious and conservative finds that abhorrent. Okay, all right, don't need to put that down your throat. And if you see that as threatening, me pushing that on you is only going to create tension. And
and it's also
right.
There's an assumption too, and again, this is another area we shouldn't get into, but I believe there's an assumption as well that all of this is organic, that this is like psychologically and also communally, whatever, organic, that this is the way things have evolved to. And this is it's different if you have somebody sitting on the side and saying to, say, a conservative person, she's trying to convert your child into a trans person. And you know what? If she does, that kid's going to go to the principal, go to their teacher, and they're going to usher them off somewhere, and they're going to cut their genitals off without you knowing anything about it. That's what's going to happen. So don't let this happen, because that's what's going to happen. I think we have that, of course, not literally like that, but I think in the culture that's going on somewhere. And it causes the people that are going, I don't want this, because this means that they're going to convert my kid, and my kid will disappear. And, you know, and
yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that that actually comes down to a very different point, which is a lot of people don't realize how much intellectual integrity that they struggle with. And so I think what happens for a lot of people is because they don't have a conscious sense of intellectual integrity, right? That to truly be anchored into their beliefs and be able to express them and understand them. They're afraid. I think people who are secular are terrified of Christians because they're afraid they're going to be converted. And I think Christians are terrified of queer men and women because they're afraid that their kids will be seduced into that. And both of it's like, but you're lacking this core thing where you have a sense of security and structure in what it is you believe and why. And because that stability in you gives you the strength to go out to be in contact with these ideas, not fearing that you're going to be pulled into them.
Well, you're nailing it. You're nailing it. And, you know, we can also expand that out to say, and the reason we have that is because people are dependent on an authority above them as a parent to tell them what they should be afraid of and what they shouldn't be afraid of. And they don't think for themselves, and not everybody, of course, but the people you're talking about, they don't have what you just call, what do you call that, intellectual integrity? I like that.
Not the right way to put it, but I think you get my point.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I mean, that's another way of saying common sense. You know,
what I'm talking about is security, though, because I think it's really about being insecure about what you believe, your value, your
exactly,
your systems.
Right. You have to have somebody else validate it for you. You have to have an authority tell you, or the government, or whatever. A
Internet
parental
call out
authority.
culture is all about that, right? It's like, you think you believe something, but then you get into contact with a very shrewd debater who will very quickly, put you on your back heels because maybe you believe something, but you can't articulate it. And usually it's formed in a kind of gotcha. See, you tried to back your views up and you couldn't find it. And I think it's like, on the one hand, people delight in seeing that because they presume that under that microscope that they would find some security. But I think a lot of people don't realize, like, here's one thing for sure. I don't want to stand in front of someone like a Charlie Kirk. I believe what I believe, but like, can I in that moment when they kind of, come at me, am I prepared? Probably not. But give me 20 minutes to like think it through. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So,
people, I think people used to rely more on gut feelings and intuition. They would say, I can't explain to you why I believe this, but I know I do, and I'm sticking with it.
Well, one of the things I'm often trying to coach people into is you don't need to defend yourself.
No, right. Exactly.
If someone says, gotcha, because you made a logical fallacy, it's like, look, I don't owe you any explanation as to why I feel this is right and this is wrong. But that's a different thing from not having intellectual integrity or having a sense of true values, right? It's about not getting pulled into this belief that some kind of like Ben Shapiro gotcha moment actually means something that it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that those people are stupid and wrong. It often looks that way on the surface, and it might, in some cases, mean that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't believe what you believe. Right?
Are you familiar with Emerson's Reliance, his essay Reliance?
Oh.
Yeah, because this is essentially Reliance.
Is it called Reliance or Self-Reliance?
It might be Self-Reliance. Yeah. I think it's Self-Reliance.
Now we're playing.
Yeah, because this is essentially what he goes into. He says you don't have to intellectualize your own self-reliance, your own knowingness about something. I mean, it's a tough one because we certainly have been trained not to rely on that. We've been indoctrinated to not trust our own view of something.
Totally.
And this is one of the biggest problems.
This is why a lot of what we would call like liberal elites are terrified at the idea that the masses can go out and be exposed to this wild marketplace of ideas that is podcasts and
that's
YouTube.
Right.
Because there's this like, you're gonna be seduced into some bullshit, which is like a fundamental disrespect. It's like you really believe that people are so stupid and so so susceptible that they're going to get pulled in, as opposed to, no, I actually believe that we can cultivate that in people, that we can say, hey, like it's okay for you to be exposed to these ideas if you come at them in a way that's going to bring you more security, right?
Right. So that's the whole misinformation, disinformation, censorship.
Yeah.
The First Amendment is dangerous because it allows people to have every bit of information that's out there, and they're going to be swayed into believing something that's not true.
Well, if the critique is that the First Amendment is dangerous, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm going to say it's dangerous and blessed be.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right? Because it means that any established idea is like, you're not going to be able to hold on to that for too long when there's a marketplace of ideas that are going to be competing. And it's kind of like what we were saying before with democracy. I mean, I think a lot of people don't like democracy because they don't like the idea that, what do you mean? For the next 4 years, we have to put up with a government that I totally don't agree with? No, I don't want that. I want to live under a government that I always agree with. Well, that's a democratic statement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And it's the same thing with ideologies. It's like, no. Like, I don't want there to be a kind of marketplace of ideas. I don't want people to be persuaded. I want there to only be, a set kind of way of believing, and that everyone agrees on that. And if you don't, you're a Nazi.
Yeah.
You're an asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you believe that, the Fourth Amendment is dangerous.
And pigs are much bigger than you'd expect. Yeah.
They are.
Okay, so we can wrap this up then. And it was great. Thank you, William. Great stuff. And again, going back through, please make comments. Please, subscribe. Let us know that what we're doing is something of interest so that we keep doing it. And we will see you next time and have another thing to talk about. And just say bye. You want to say bye?
Everyone. And as always, when you see a blind spot in my thinking or argument, please let me know. I'm here to hear it through.
Great. Same here. Okay. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.